Hey YouTube, what's going on? Today we are going to talk about a discussion that has been going on Twitter and in the Rocket League community about comparing two teams. It's the main thing everybody loves to do, rank teams, compare teams, but specifically this time it's about comparing two runs through a tournament that you may or may not remember. The first team that everybody is talking about is Cloud9. Cloud9 from Season 6 at the World Championships in Las Vegas made a run through the lower bracket that finished in winning the championship. Now, if you don't remember what that looked like, don't worry. I have it right here for you. This is the Liquipedia from the tournament. And the way the tournament used to work in this stage is there was a regional tournament that would seed the teams going in, and then they were straight into bracket play. There was no pool play. There was nothing else. It's just right into a double elimination. You can see Cloud9 had to play We Dem Girls, the number 2 seed from EU first, got sent to the lower bracket, and then ran through the lower bracket through all these teams you could see here, finishing with 2 wins over Dignitas to win the World Championship. So we'll talk more about the teams that they're playing against and whatnot, and maybe you now have been reminded of Cloud9's run. But people are comparing that to a recent run. If you saw the LA Major recently, Team Queso did a great job running through the lower bracket as well. Their situation was slightly different because the format was slightly different. It starts with pool play first, in which Queso was able to get an easy win. They lost to version 1, and then their run starts with FaZe at the end of their pool play. They beat FaZe to set themselves up for a run through the lower bracket, NRG, EG, FeerRL, FaZe, ending with a win over G2 to force a bracket reset, but then a loss to finish second in the event. They did not end up winning this LAN, but people have gone to comparing the run from Team Queso and Cloud9. Which one was more impressive, I think, is the phrase that everybody is using. So it can get really tough to make these kind of discussions. I think a lot of the time it has to do with exactly what words you say. If you say impressive, maybe it means one thing. If you say memorable, maybe it means another thing. If you say best, it could mean another thing. But I do think the original prompt was impressive. So let's talk a little bit about what we think that could possibly mean and compare the two runs. So I have pulled up both the runs from the two teams. Here we got Cloud9 on the left. I've color-coded it the way that Johnny usually does. This is where most of this discussion starts on Johnny's stream. But we got Cloud9's run through Tainted Minds, the OCE 2 seed, NRG, the NA 1 seed, and then Flipside Tactics, Chiefs, We Dem Girls, and Dignitas twice. Queso has FaZe, then NRG, number 1 seed, then EG, the 5th seed. There wasn't even 5th seeds for EU at the original lands at Season 6. And then Furia, and then FaZe again, SSG, and G2. So there's a bunch of different ways to compare these runs. And technically what we're not showing here at the end of Queso's run is a loss to G2. We're just comparing the wins that they got consecutively and deciding which one do we think is more impressive. So to be fair, I think coming in, Queso is going to have a really hard time making an argument. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've shifted a little bit and understood what I think the people who are saying Queso has a better run mean. And if we just go down the line right here at the beginning of Cloud9's run, I think the Tainted Minds win is, of the wins we see here on the screen, easily the least impressive. You kind of expect Cloud9 to take Tainted Minds down. The OCE as a region, especially, their teams who are performing worse, even though I think Tainted Minds might have come into this as the 1 seed. I have them listed here as 2 because they performed as a 2 seed, but they might have been the 1 seed. Either way, OCE was really only ever having one good team, and I think this Chiefs finish is the best finish ever from an OCE team. So the second team was still finding their footing. I think this win, definitely compared to every other win, is the least impressive. So you could take a hit on Cloud9's run there. And then if you compare the two NRG wins, actually the NRG wins are very, very similar. On one side, you have Cloud9 beating NRG after they finished second at the last LAN, looking like one of the best teams in North America, coming in as the North American 1 seed, but then ultimately falling to the team making the run. Now, that's the case with Queso as well. Queso playing NRG. NRG just finished second against BDS at that last LAN, and then came in as the 1 seed for North America again, but then fell to Queso. So I think those wins probably equal. It's hard to say that one is better than the other. That team should have been a good team in both cases, and both these teams shut them down. So then we move on to Flipside Tactics and EG. Now, in Cloud9's case, he couldn't have possibly played against a number 5 European seed. I think you can make an argument for these being fairly similar. It's kind of note that Flipside is like a classic team and Cooksier was a classic player, but that doesn't necessarily make Flipside a more impressive team. EG had just come off of a win against Dignitas, and Dignitas is one of the better players in EU at the time, so you could argue EG is looking maybe a little bit better or just as good as Flipside. I think the Chiefs and the Furia matchup is kind of very interesting. It's the minor region's best teams, and I think the best finish for either of the regions. I think Furia finishing tied for 6th is the best that Sam has ever done, and I think Chiefs finishing tied for 4th is the best that OCE has ever done. And I'll get into this later. I think there's reasons why you could shift towards Queso's side, but just at face value, they seem like pretty similar wins. Now, one of the things I want to talk about for the next 3 wins is at the time before this Cloud9 run, this Season 6 run, EU had been dominant. I want to say the last time North America had won was the first season. I mean, unless I'm thinking missing something crazy here, North America kind of stole Season 1 from Flipside, and then ever since then, EU has dominated. They have had the better region, and NRG came close in the previous season to taking down Dig, but Dig still got the win. And Weedham Girls and Dignitas both won and put themselves into the upper final, so they were showing that even the number 2 seed, even though Dignitas had been dominating EU all season long, Weedham Girls was still a good team. It wasn't that EU was bad. It was just that Dignitas was just that good. So this run through Weedham Girls and then Dignitas twice, I think is the reason why it separates Cloud9's run from Queso's run. You look at Queso's side, they played the 3 seed from FaZe and the 5th seed, the 3rd seed from North America, which was FaZe, and the 5th seed from North America, which was SSG, and then finishing off with the 2nd seed, G2. These were good wins, but they don't come from teams that were quite as obviously dominant as the EU teams were at the time for Cloud9. And that actually brings up a good point. Obviously dominant. I think one of the big things that people are trying to argue for Queso being the better run is that it's really hard to be obviously dominant in the new era of Rocket League. People are playing, or teams are playing so many more games. There's so much more Rocket League to be played, and it's such an open format that competition is incredibly high, and that teams as a whole have become better, and it's become harder to win consistently like Dignitas did in Season 6 and Season 5 and the season before. So one other thing that I looked at to point this out, and I think the reason why maybe people are saying Queso could have had a better run, I just need to bring these out, as I counted the number of wins that the teams that they beat, oh, whoa, that's another way to do it. Not the way I meant to do it. The teams that they beat got during the event. So at the end of the event, how many wins did that team finish with? Because it almost gives you an idea of how impressive it was to beat them. I mean, if they're playing bad that event, even if they're supposed to be a good team, maybe that's not that impressive. So you look at Cloud9's run, you see Tainted Minds, like I talked about earlier, didn't get a win in the event. NRG, even though being their number 1 North American seed, also didn't get a win. And then teams like Flipside had only gotten 1 win before getting to, maybe later in the format where some teams had shown that they were playing well. Now, in Queso's sense, because the format's so different, because there's just more Rocket League, not only just in the regular season, but also in the actual playoffs, a ton of these teams had gotten a ton of wins by the time they played them. NRG was the team with the lowest amount of wins, only 1 win that they beat during this run. But EG got a couple different wins at the event. Furia, FaZe, SSG, even though they were the 5th seed, they had already shown that they could beat very good teams, teams that had beaten Queso earlier, so they obviously were playing at a high level. And then G2, who ultimately got 5 wins because they did end up winning the event, must have been pretty solid. So stealing 1 from them would be pretty good. So here, I think what the ultimate argument for the Queso run being the better run just has to do with the progression of Rocket League, the fact that teams are getting better, it's getting harder to win consistently, and overall, that likely is meaning that the set of wins that they got against the teams they played should be considered more impressive. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why you can't possibly say that Cloud9's run wasn't better is because of this Dignitas team. This Dignitas team was so good, so dominant. I remember being worried that we were going to have to deal with them winning championships for who knows how long, because they hadn't lost a game since, I think, sometime in the bracket play in the previous season. They had gone through the entire season undefeated and come into the finals again. Now, it's easier to go undefeated in the past. Dignitas only had to play, I believe, 7 games. They play in the league, and then you play the playoffs, so maybe like 10. But 10 games versus the many, many, many more that the new format forces teams to play. But I also think you can't hold Dignitas back for that. Dignitas, they won every game that was put in front of them. For all we know, they could have been equally as dominant as maybe a team like BDS was when they had an opportunity to win a bunch of regionals in a row. Maybe they would have done the same. So I think the way that Cloud9 made this run, beating Dignitas, truly, truly an absolute dynasty, makes it uncomparable, especially with the fact that we're basically not including this final game for Queso, which did end in a loss. If you kind of include the loss, there's really no point of even comparing these. So I gave the benefit of the doubt, didn't include the loss, and just compared the wins. All that being said, I think Cloud9 had the better run. I think Cloud9 showed a new way to play the game in that Season 6, a way that I think Queso, play style is maybe even derivative from, like just insane mechanical play and being able to use that wisely in order to, make effective wins. I mean, at the time, I think people were really, really impressed with the way Cloud9 did it. And especially Torment, who got the MVP, had an amazing tournament that people were not expecting. But anyways, this has been a huge discussion. And I'll be honest, when I thought about it at first, I thought, why are we even talking about this? Cloud9's run ended with a win. Queso's ended with a loss. But I think the only argument everyone else is trying to make is that Rocket League is getting better. It's getting harder to win. Queso managed to do a bunch of winning in a row. So maybe you could say their run was more impressive. But I think we're only having this conversation if they beat G2 and they win in the reverse, the bracket reset as well. Then we chat. I still think Cloud9's run is maybe better because of just how good that Dignitas team was. But without that win, there's no reason to chat. Cloud9 had the better run. That's what I think. And this video has been long enough. See you guys later.